epic city, the Islamic city in the state of Texas that was set to be built, hasn't actually stopped its plans. It's just rebranded as the Meadow. What is going on there? And is there anything that Texas politicians can do about that? Also, this month marks the 10-year anniversary of an Islamic attack in France that strangely not very many people know about. But there's also some good news on today's episode. Christian music is taking over, and it is changing maybe how people think about God and marriage and children. We've got all of that and so much more on today's episode of Relatable. It's brought to you by our friends at Kelsea Cookies. Y'all, Kelsea Cookies are so good. They just sent us a box. Their flavors are incredible. It's made with real ingredients. Now is the time to buy you a box of Kelsea cookies. Give it to your coworkers or give it as a gift to people in your life or as a gift to your family and to yourself. They are so good. Go to Kelsea.com. Use code Allie15. You'll save 15% on your order. That's Kelsea.com, code Allie15. Hey guys, welcome to Relatable. Happy Monday. Hope everyone had a wonderful weekend. Well, you know what I'm going to say. God's eternal plan of redemption is going off without a hitch. No matter what is happening personally in your life, no matter what's happening politically or professionally, nothing surprises God. He's never looking down at your life or America or the world saying, oh my gosh, I did not see this coming. I don't know what to do to fix this. He's not waiting on us to figure it out. He is sovereign over all of it, and his eternal plan of redemption, him calling his people to himself, him gathering his flock of sheep, all of that is proceeding forth completely and totally unhindered. Job 42:2 reminds us that nothing can thwart the will of God. We can violate his moral will. Of course, we sin. That is not something that God wants of us. That is not something that God makes us do, but God's sovereign will, his desire for things to go a certain way in history cannot be thwarted by anything we think, say, or do, because he has all of the power. And that is very good news. That means that the only thing that we are responsible to do in any given moment is not to control the outcomes of our own lives, of our children's lives, of the political election, whatever it is. It's to do the next right thing in faith with excellence and for the glory of God. That means stewarding our responsibility as a citizen well, as a mom well, as a wife well, as an employee well, as a student well, as a friend well, as a church member well, as a pastor well, whatever it is, as a Christian well. That means stewarding every moment for the glory of God with the best Holy Spirit empowered excellence that we possibly can, having the faith that God is going to take care of us and that the outcomes, the conclusions of all of this are totally in his hands. And that brings a lot of peace. It is a start of a new week. And we read in the book of Lamentations that God's mercies are new every morning. How great is that? He's not holding grudges against us, but his mercy through Christ is new every single day. So no matter how you sinned yesterday, no matter how you failed yesterday, the shortcomings that you just can't seem to get over, the obstacles that you seem to never be able to overcome, God's mercy for today is brand new. His mercy for you to be a patient mom and a loving wife and an excellent student or employee or obedient in whatever realm you're in, that mercy for you is abundant and it is ready for you today. Open up your Bible, pray, seek forgiveness if you need to seek forgiveness, offer forgiveness where you need to offer forgiveness. God's mercies are new for you and you are never too far off and you're never too far gone. So let us start today thinking of these things, because as we get into the subjects for today, some of them are not troubling. Some of them are encouraging, actually, but we're going to start with one that is troubling. And the reason that we talk about some troubling things is not because we want to be paranoid. It's not because we want to be stuck down in the mud of, distress or anxiety, but we need to understand what's happening in our world, the world and the country and the culture that our children are going to inherit. We have to care about that. And we have to know what's going on. And we have to think about how do we engage in a responsible Christian way to raise a respectful ruckus for the things that matter, to push back against the darkness, to be salt and light in a world that is dark. And that includes in the realm of culture and politics. That's not too difficult or divisive for a Christian. That is exactly one of the places where Christians need to be, because when Christians retreat from any space or any sphere, it just gets darker and more chaotic, and innocent people pay the price. That is certainly true when it comes to the Islamification of the United States, which is something that is happening. Like, there's so much debate on, what really matters, like on the right now. You have some people that will say, no, all of our problems are actually coming from Israel. All of our problems are coming from one group of people. And that's not to say we can't criticize any other country. Of course we can, or that we shouldn't put American priorities first, because of course we should. But that seems to be a distraction from the real problem that is happening right now, and that is the increasing dominance and pervasiveness of Islam in all of our communities. You'll remember when we talked about Epic City. This was the Muslim-centered neighborhood that was planned around the East Plano area. And if you're not familiar, I grew up in Dallas, and so I can tell you that Plano is very pretty affluent. It depends on which part of Plano you're talking about. It's huge, but it's a suburb of Dallas, of North Dallas. And Plano, like Frisco and Louisville, and a lot of these North Dallas suburbs have become extremely ethnically diverse. They are hubs for a lot of new commerce, a lot of new businesses that are kind of importing a lot of H-1B workers and simply a lot of immigrants into Texas to work these jobs. So the demographics have changed a lot. So Epic City, as I said, this was a Muslim-centered neighborhood that was planned actually in Josephine, Texas, but based on kind of coming out of something called East Plano Islamic Center. So that's where you get the acronym EPIC. And it faced a lot of scrutiny. We talked about it at the time back in April amid a federal DOJ probe that was sparked by Governor Greg Abbott and Senator John Cornyn, other Texas leaders that were concerned that a Muslim-exclusive neighborhood would discriminate against Christians and Jewish people or push Sharia. And we'll talk about what Sharia actually is. However, that shut down. Okay, so there was a lot of concern, and because of the controversy, they said, okay, we're not going to do this, even though the people who said they were going to start Epic City, that they would be welcoming to everyone, but we know how that goes. So that same project is pushing forward again. So it's no longer Epic City. They decided that's causing a PR problem. Now we are going to rename this. We're not going to stop. We're just going to rename it something very seemingly innocuous and inviting called the Meadow. So this is not supposed to be a separate city, but it's supposed to just be a neighborhood that happens to be extremely friendly to Muslims. But the same concerns exist. This would be a 402-acre community that includes over 1,000 homes, a K-12 Islamic school, a mosque, senior and assisted living, apartments, clinics, shops, a community college, and sports fields. And we will show you, you should be able to see on screen like what the layout is actually supposed to look like there. You can see it. So that's obviously computer generated. You've got the big mosque in the middle there. You've got all of these homes. And I mean, it looks very state of the art. It looks very beautiful, but it is centered on wanting to create a neighborhood, wanting to create a large community just for Muslims. Legally, they wouldn't be able to tell someone who is Jewish or who is Christian, hey, get out of here. You can't move here. But that is essentially what it is for. Community Capital Partners is the name of the company behind the project. It's formed by members of EPIC. Collin County Judge Chris Hill informed residents via Facebook post on November 8th that Community Capital Partners is preparing to submit their plans to the county for review. Now, no plat, that's a detailed map of what the neighborhood would be, has actually been filed with Collin County yet, but reports suggests CCP, not to be confused with the Chinese Communist Party, again, that's Community Capital Partners, who's planning to build this neighborhood, has either filed plans or plans to file soon with the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality to establish a municipal utility district that handles water, sewer drainage for the Meadow. Okay, so it does seem like the plans are moving forward, but we don't know exactly when or what it's going to look like. And look, you could say one argument is that, look, people are allowed to do what they want to do. If Jewish people wanted to do this, if Christians wanted to do this, they could, which I'm sure is not actually true. I think it would be much more controversial in the mainstream if Christians said, hey, we are going to establish this community and we're going to name it after a church. And this is where Christians are going to live. It's going to be centered around this particular church. There's going to be a Christian school, Christian bank, all that. I think that sounds amazing, by the way. But there would be a lot of controversy if any other religion besides Islam or besides one of those Eastern religions was doing this. And the reason why people are upset about it, at least people on the right, Christian conservatives, is simply because of the cultural change that it causes. Simply because when you have a high concentration of Islamists in one area, there is a concern about how that changes the culture and the safety of your city. We don't believe in moral relativism. We don't believe that all faiths and all worldviews are the same. It is extremely fair for people who have lived in a predominantly Christian country that was founded by Christians, that was first, when it was founded, primarily for Christians, to say, how is this going to change my country? How is this going to change my community? When you have a people who believe entirely in Sharia, who have an entirely different view of women and human worth and rights and right and wrong, it is totally fair to ask, is that congruent with the Constitution? Is that congruent with the American community that we have created? The problem, Charlie Kirk talked about this a lot, is not individual Muslims. It's Islam as an ideology, Islam as a collective belief system. And when you look throughout the world at the fruit of Islamic collectivism, the result has been chaos and violence and the degradation of the human person and human dignity. That is just true. When you look at migrant crime trends throughout the world, especially in Europe, you see that migrants from Muslim-majority countries are disproportionately responsible for crimes, including and especially sexually violent crimes. So I don't want to hear anything, well, this is just like a Christian community, or this is just like a Jewish community, or this is just like any other community. It's not, because not all belief systems are the same. Not all worldviews have the same fruit. So totally justified for people to be concerned about this. And we'll talk about some of the legality behind, like, okay, what can you actually do when it comes to something like this? But I just want to say, if you're concerned and you don't know how to put words to why you're concerned, you are justified. It is justified when you know that about 99% of all worldwide designated terrorist groups are Islamic. You have good reason to say, do we want a high concentration of people who buy into that ideology to have their own basically independent system here in the United States or in the state of Texas? Completely justified. By the way, this is not just a trend that's happening in Texas, in the red state of Texas. It's happening elsewhere too. And we'll talk about that in just a second. Let me pause and tell you about our next sponsor for the day, and that is 7 Weeks Coffee. 7 Weeks Coffee is America's pro-life coffee company. They're on a mission to fund the pro-life movement by supplying you with really great tasting, totally organic, high quality, clean coffee. We love 7 Weeks Coffee in our home. And we love that 10% of every sale of 7 Weeks Coffee goes to a pro-life pregnancy center across the country. They have donated over 1 million to these pregnancy centers. That has translated into saving thousands of lives. So just by you allowing your coffee to serve a higher purpose, you have served moms, dads, their babies. You have saved lives. You have enabled these women to then hear the gospel at these Christian pregnancy centers, all because you are buying coffee from 7 Weeks Coffee. They're called 7 Weeks Coffee because at 7 weeks gestation, that baby inside the womb is the size of a coffee bean, and he or she is fully made in God's image and is worthy of our protection. Go ahead and subscribe to 7 Weeks Coffee. You'll save 15% when you do that, and you'll get your box of 7 Weeks Coffee to your front door every month. Plus, when you use my code Allie at checkout, you save 10% on your order. That's 7weekscoffee.com, code Allie. Okay, y'all, let me just tell you that I am going to have to put the rest of our ads kind of closer together because I waited 15 minutes to do the first one, which is a little too long. So just FYI, just a heads up on that. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about the Islamification specifically of Texas. Texas actually has one of the largest Muslim populations in the United States, estimated about 420,000. I would guess that it's probably more than that. Texas had 224 mosques in 2020, and over the past 5 years, that's just grown, but that is up quite a lot from 166 in 2010. As of October 15th, 2025. So here's that exact number. There were 330 mosques listed in Texas. So continued growth there. Of course, that's still smaller than the number of churches, of course, a lot smaller. But anytime you see this kind of significant growth, it's worth looking at. At a Josephine City Council meeting, remember this is where that epic city was going to be, an Armenian American resident of Collin County took the microphone to share a chilling personal warning drawn from his family's persecution at the hands of the Ottomans who practiced Sharia. He warned the Muslims will be civil until they become the majority. That should sound familiar to you if you watched my episode with Raymond Ibrahim. Here's thought 3.
Once they get to a certain point in a culture, they start to ravage it from within. Understanding what their whole intent is not the typical Muslim that you come across. They're all good people. They love one another. They love you. They'll tell you they love you. But when they get to a certain point where they have to do a certain thing, they're going to be forced into it, whether they like it or not. And the problem that we see in society is they don't speak up against it.
That is true. Of course, you can see that in Muslim majority countries, and you can see that in places in Europe, which have become Muslim majority. And again, go listen to my episode or watch my episode with Raymond Ibrahim. He is a scholar and historian who has wrote several books on the history of Islam and what the Quran actually says. And this is the difference between Medina and Mecca. When Muslims are in the minority, they will take on many of the values and the kind of disposition of the majority culture at the time until they become the majority. And again, this isn't necessarily about individual people. This is about the political ideology. Remember, Islam means submission, and that is what they are setting out to do. If we ask ourselves, well, if they like Sharia, which is Islamic law, which is totally incongruent with American law. And if they want this kind of culture, if they want an entire city and community where there's a majority of Muslims and everything is basically run by Sharia, then why here? Why not just stay there? Well, because it is about conquest. It is about submission. It is not about it's not necessarily about evangelism like Christianity is, and it's not even about having their own enclaves for their own enjoyment and protection. It is about infiltration. It is about domination, and this is true at the roots of Islam. It's not just a particular iteration of Islam. It is true fundamentally. So what actually is Sharia? It is Islamic law, and Sharia just means law. So Sharia law is kind of like saying law, but I think it's fine to say Sharia law because it helps us understand what it is. It's a legal and ethical framework that is derived from Islamic teachings, primarily the Quran, very harsh punishments: hand amputation for theft, stoning for adultery, death, or leaving Islam, amputation or crucifixion for robbery. Insulting Islam leads to death. This is, of course, why you've seen in places like England and France, people who have insulted their prophet Muhammad have been murdered by Muslims who feel like it is their religious duty to do so. The gender rules and roles: women need to be fully covered. Of course, in some countries, this is stricter. Women can't even show their eyes. They're completely covered head to toe, starting from a very young age. And then in other countries, it's just that the hair and the head and most of the body needs to be covered. Women need a male guardian and their permission to travel or to drive. In many Muslim majority countries, education for young girls stops at 6th grade, even if it's allowed at all. Women's court testimony counts as half of a man's. Men can have up to 4 wives in their marriage rules in Sharia. Women cannot have multiple husbands. Child marriage in Muslim majority countries is not morally questionable at all. It is completely permitted, and that is, of course, because the Prophet Muhammad married Aisha when she was 6 years old, and supposedly they did not consummate the marriage until she was 9. And of course, they revered the Prophet Muhammad as basically perfect. And so they wouldn't be able to denounce pedophilia or denounce child marriage without denouncing their own prophet, which of course is punishable by death. And so that alone should give people pause when they say, we're just a mosaic in America. The more the merrier, the more diverse we are, the more we can learn. Well, again, not every worldview is the same. Not every religion teaches the same thing. And it is actually because of our Christian ethical framework here in America that we have a natural and righteous revulsion to something like child marriage or pedophilia. Because fundamental in the Christian belief is that marriage is for procreation. What do we read in the very first chapters of Genesis? That God made man and woman, not boy and girl, not man and girl, but man and woman, and told them immediately to be fruitful and multiply. So while we don't have the exact ages of Adam and Eve, we see from the very beginning that God created marriage, not only to reflect the marriage between Christ and his bride, the church, but also to procreate. And that is only possible between a man and a woman. Again, not a man and a child. So fundamental in Christianity is the idea that sexual relations are exclusive to marriage between one man and one woman. This is not true of many other religions. It's certainly not true of Islam. Here is Yasir Qadi, the imam behind Epic City, explaining some crimes and their respective punishments under Sharia. Sot 5.
This is a part of our religion, to stone the adulterer and to chop the head off of the so many sorcerer and so many other things, and to kill, by the way, the homosexual. This is also of our religion. The fiqh ruling concerning the homosexual, that he be killed. Okay? I don't know about this one, but I have heard this, but I haven't studied this in detail. But I know that his punishment is death. Okay? This is all a part of our religion. This doesn't mean we go do this in America. No, we're not allowed to do this in America, But I'm saying if we had an Islamic state, we would do this type of stuff.
That's interesting that he just says that. Now, I will say some of those things were also punishable by death in the Old Testament. However, we are not abiding by in America today, nor are we responsible to abide by Israeli law. Ancient Israel, God's chosen people, abided by the laws that were passed down to them by God through Moses. And while the moral laws Christians are still bound to keep today, because Jesus not only fulfills them but doubles down on those moral laws, the cleansing laws, the legal laws, the procedural laws, we are not bound to today, nor are Christians called to create that kind of theocracy by imposing Israeli law on America today or on any country today. We believe in making disciples. We believe in infusing light and goodness and truth and God's ways into every sphere of society peacefully and persuasively. That is very different than what you just heard there from that imam. The truth is that Sharia courts are already operating in Texas. America's first Islamic tribunal was founded in Irving, Texas in 2015, according to CBS. According to its official website, this institution will serve an important niche in our society because we as Muslims in the United States need to unite on our common belief and creed. I mean, you have to give it to them that they're asking forgiveness, not permission. They're just proceeding with creating their Islamic state and community and laws and procedures here in the United States. And they are basically bidding people to stop them. And they're very cohesive as a people in a way that Christians simply aren't. Now, I'm not even saying that positively because, of course, their punishment for blasphemy or for disagreeing with each other is very harsh in a way that it's not for Christianity. But I mean, you got to hand it to their persistence and just the audacity to do something like this. And I think they understand that the fear of coming across as Islamophobic is so great and the toxic empathy is so high toward a purported victim that most people aren't going to say anything. Also, people are scared for their lives. So that helps them too. All right, we've got more on this in just a second. Let me pause, tell you about our next sponsor. It's Adele Natural Cosmetics. This is another Christian-founded, family-owned company. They are creating high-end, handcrafted cosmetic and skincare products. I use them every day. Love it so much. I just love knowing that what I am putting on my skin is actually good for my skin, that I don't have to worry about it being toxic or an endocrine disruptor, the kind of toxic ingredients that you find in most products today. So when I'm not in studio, I'm wearing my Adele Natural Cosmetics makeup. I am using their oil-based essential cleanser every night. I also love that they have Christmas-themed products. They're really, really cute. The wrapping is so cute, and they've got a Bible verse on every single one of their packages because they are the real deal. They're unapologetically Christian, unapologetically pro-life. Arlene and her family are just genuine and awesome people. This is the kind of company that you want to support. You'll be glad you did because your skin will thank you. Go to AdeleNaturalCosmetics.com. Use code Allie for 25% off your first time purchase. That's AdeleNaturalCosmetics.com. Code Allie. A 2011 report by the Center for Security Policy claimed that 146 U.S. court cases referenced Sharia, with 20% fully deferring to it over American law, often harming Muslim women and children seeking U.S. protections. I don't even know how that's possible, and we don't have time to dive into the details of that particular report. I mean, that was 15 years ago almost, and so I can imagine that it's only gotten worse since then. Now, Greg Abbott, he knows that this is an issue that a lot of people are concerned about, and he signed a law a few weeks ago. I actually don't have the date on this. He signed a law a few weeks ago that outlaws compounds like Epic City, so Muslim compounds. It prevents no-go zones. So, a Muslim community can't say, hey, you can't come in here if you're a Christian or a Jewish person. It prevents selling land to only Muslims, requires disputes to be brought under Texas laws and Texas courts, not Sharia. I mean, it's just sad that this is necessary. Kudos to the Texas legislature and to Greg Abbott for taking this seriously. He said this: one of the issues at stake is the freedom of religion. Another issue at stake is what's called the right to contract. The fact is, religious freedom is a central part of the Texas Constitution. Bad actors like Epic City tried to use religion as a form of segregation. HB 4211 targets the unusual setup the Meadow planned, where buyers wouldn't own the land or home directly, but would buy a share in a company that owns everything and grants them the right to live there. Not everyone is content with this move, though. There are people in Texas who think that more needs to happen. Here's Thought 6.
Governor Abbott signed HB 4711 a couple months ago, which only prevents the forcing of somebody to sell their property back to the mosque. It doesn't stop them from doing it voluntarily. And as we know, in Islamic culture, it's okay to lie if it advances their cause. This bill did not address that Sharia law and our Constitution are not compatible, and it did not ban Sharia law, despite suggestions otherwise.
Yeah, so people want more than this. They want even more action by the state of Texas. But, I agree. Like, I concur. I share that same sentiment. But we need people to come to the table with real solutions. And obviously, we are under the Texas Constitution for a good reason. There is a freedom of religion. So what actually can be done. And I think it's up to the people down in Austin to make sure that they are coming up with good solutions. So what else is being done? Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton believes that individuals behind the Meadow have broken the law. He has promised to prosecute any violations. For example, he said, after a thorough investigation, it has become clear that the developers behind Epic City flagrantly and undeniably violated the law. This is an illegal scheme. It must be held accountable for ignoring state and federal regulations. He says, in order to sue and hold the parties behind Epic City accountable, the Office of the Attorney General must receive a referral from the Texas State Securities Board. They've invited the Commissioner, Chairman E. Wally Kinney, to examine the initial findings and corresponding evidence that demonstrates the Epic City Development Project violated the law, and subsequently refer the matter back to the Attorney General's office for further legal action if the TSSB agrees with the office's findings. State Rep Brent Money, he's a Republican from Greenville, Texas. He said stopping the Islamization of Texas is a top priority, but, and this is the general sentiment for a lot of people, I don't know what to do about that. He said you need to look and see what the Muslim radicals in Texas are saying that their plan is, and you need to start believing them. He added, it is not compatible with a Christian nation, which we are. So what is the biblical perspective on this? It seems like we're kind of in limbo figuring out like what is the political solution for this? Because again, for all of the reasons that we listed, constitutional reasons, cultural reasons, moral reasons, like people have a good justification for feeling uneasy about this. And by the way, like you are just allowed to care about the culture and the feeling of the neighborhood that you live in. Okay, you're allowed to notice that the demographics have changed. You're allowed to notice how that impacts your kids, how that impacts your safety, how that impacts your community. You're allowed to notice that. You're allowed to care about that. You're allowed to want most of your neighbors to celebrate Christmas. Like you're allowed to want those kind of shared values with your neighborhood, because the more different you are, the more difficult it is to have the commonalities that are needed for a social contract. We have to actually trust our neighbors and share some kind of basic understanding of morality and decency with our neighbors in order for us to live in a cohesive society. And there's this book by Robert Putnam called Bowling Alone, where he talks about the increased diversity in all of our neighborhoods has contributed to a lack of trust that has contributed to isolation and loneliness and kids playing outside less. And I'm not even laying that at the feet of any one type of people. It's just true. This is just human nature, and you can call that bigotry if you want to, but this has been true for all of human history. And actually, the Muslims realize that. That's why they are creating neighborhoods that are based on their ideology so that they can be surrounded by people who look like them and think like them and talk like them. But when people who are not Muslims say, well, I kind of want that myself, well, then that's supposedly some kind of supremacy or racism or bigotry. You're allowed to want Christian culture to be preserved in a nation who can attribute all of the good things that we have to Christian ideology and to the Christian worldview. So what is the biblical perspective on Islam? Let's just talk about Islam a little bit theologically. Islam explicitly denies the Trinity, the deity of Christ, the sonship of Christ, and salvation by the cross. You hear people say, oh, well, Jews, Christians, and Muslims, we all worship the same God. And I even hear people say, well, Islam at least honors Jesus as a prophet. I've even heard people say that Muslims love Jesus. No, they don't believe in the Jesus that we believe in. They deny his deity. And of course, Jewish people don't believe that Jesus is God either. So I think it's wrong. Yes, we are all in Abrahamic religions, you could say, but we don't worship the same God, because Christians and Christians alone believe in the triune God. We believe that Jesus is God, that the Holy Spirit is God. 1 John 2:22 through 23. Who is the liar but he who denies that Jesus is the Christ? This is the Antichrist, he who denies the Father and the Son. Whoever denies the Son does not have the Father either. He who confesses the Son has the Father also. John 5:23, that all may honor the Son just as they honor the Father. Whoever does not honor the Son does not honor the Father who sent him. And I also just want to say, and this is very different, but this is why Christianity is distinct. This is the definition of Christianity. If there is anyone who denies that Jesus is God, that person is not a Christian. Okay, it's not enough to say Jesus was a prophet or Jesus was a teacher or Jesus was a rabbi or Jesus was a son of God or a child of God. Jesus is God according to Christianity. Islam teaches Jesus was not crucified. This is in the Quran. This directly contradicts the central message of salvation in Christianity. 1 Corinthians 15:3-4, for I delivered to you as of first importance what I also received, that Christ died for our sins in accordance with the scriptures, that he was buried, that he was raised on the third day in accordance with the scriptures. Western civilization was built on biblical ethics, honest courts, due process, covenant marriage between one man and one woman, monotheism, equal dignity, the rule of law. Religious systems denying the true God fundamentally oppose this salvation. 2 Corinthians 6:14-16, do not be unequally yoked with unbelievers. For what partnership has righteousness with lawlessness, or what fellowship has light with darkness? What accord has Christ with Belial? Or what portion does a believer share with an unbeliever? What agreement has the temple of God with idols? For we are the temple of the living God. Whenever God's people, this is the fourth point, whenever God's people embraced or tolerated false religions, destruction followed, chaos followed. Psalm 9:17, the wicked shall return to Sheol, all the nations that forget God. Now, we do have a First Amendment in this country that allows freedom of religious expression. And it should. But we should be concerned about the insidious nature of an ideology that is based upon the submission of every individual, every infidel, and every culture and every country but its own. Because that doesn't allow us to have the freedom of religion that is guaranteed to us in the First Amendment. Number 5, Islam claims that Muhammad is the final prophet, but Christianity cannot accept another prophet after Christ. Not a prophet like that. The Bible warns against false prophets. Hebrews 1:1-2. Long ago, at many times and in many ways, God spoke to our fathers by the prophets, but in these last days, he has spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed the heir of all things. Matthew 24:24, for false Christs and false prophets will arise and perform great signs and wonders so as to lead astray, if possible, even the elect. Western civilization's moral structure, law, justice, dignity came from Scripture. Islamic law, Sharia, derives from a different God, a different moral code, and a different foundation. A society built on another God's law is not compatible with biblical justice. Isaiah 33:22, for the Lord is our judge, the Lord is our lawgiver, the Lord is our king, he will save us. Romans 13:4. For he, the government official, is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain, for he is the servant of God, an avenger who carries out God's wrath on the wrongdoer. So, when a servant of God in the government is not following God, and therefore he does not define right and wrong the way that God defines right and wrong, you get a lot of trouble. You get a lot of chaos. You get a lot of moral subversion. We've seen that over and over again in the United States and elsewhere. The Jewish people and the Christian people share one half of Scripture. And so there's a lot of commonality there, a lot of shared foundation there. That's why it tends to work. But when you have someone that denies that denies the fundamentals of that biblical worldview, that is going to be incompatible, especially when it's taken to a large scale. Biblical peace is grounded in reconciliation with God through Christ. Islam explicitly rejects this reconciliation and historically spreads by coercion. Matthew 7:15, beware of false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly are ravenous wolves. I would also read Psalm 37, and just a reminder of God's promise to us in Christ as his people versus those who are enemies of God. It's also, I just got one more short thing to say about Islam, and then we're going to move on to our to our next subjects, let me pause and tell you about our next sponsor for the day, and that is Good Ranchers. This is another American company. They love God. They love America. This is a family-owned company, and you want to support them because they are supporting such an important industry that has been so unfairly treated in the United States, and that is the farming and ranching industry. Every bit of Good Ranchers, whether it's seafood, bacon, steak, all cuts of beef, their chicken, all of it comes from an American farm or ranch. It is so high quality. It's really good. It's what we rely on in the Stuckey home and have for years. And especially when we are celebrating this very American holiday of Thanksgiving, your table should be filled with American products. Get them from Good Ranchers. It'll show up on your front door on dry ice. When you subscribe, you save even more money. You get that box of meat sent to your front door every month. And right now, when you use my code Allie, you can save $100 off your first 3 orders. So that means the first order, you save $40. The second order, you save $30. And the third order, you save $30, totaling in $100 of savings. Go to goodranchers.com, use code Allie for that discount. That's goodranchers.com, code Allie. So this is just a warning. I did not remember this at all. But this is what tends to happen when Islam starts to dominate and they get the political power and the power in numbers. November 13th, so just the other day, marked the 10th year anniversary of the Bataclan, I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that, massacre in which Islamic State jihadist gunmen and suicide bombers killed 132 people and injured more than 600 people at 6 locations in Paris, France, including the Bataclan Theater in the country's deadliest peacetime attack. Do you remember this? Like, does this ring a bell? It doesn't ring a bell to me. And it's only 10 years ago. So I would have been paying attention to what was going on in the world 10 years ago. And I mean, maybe I did know about it and I just forgot. George Fenech, the lawmaker leading a parliamentary investigation into the attacks back in 2016, expressed frustration to the commission that information about the victim mutilations was withheld from both families and the media. This is very gruesome. Testimony said that some of the eyes of certain people in these attacks have been removed. Victims endured eyes gouged out, rape, genital mutilation beyond the initial gunfire. A police witness explained that bodies had not been shown to the families because they were decapitated, swollen, and disemboweled. Amy Mack of the Rare Foundation is among the voices that argue that the level of violence was not suppressed to protect the privacy of the victims, but to protect the country from some kind of revolt against the French government or against the policies that have allowed these migrants from Muslim-majority countries to come here and to create this kind of violence. I mean, hundreds of French people were disemboweled and raped and tortured and murdered in attacks in Paris by all Muslim men, and you might not even know about it. Just 10 years ago. The attackers were young men primarily of North African origin, recruited in Belgium and France, trained in Islamic State territory in the Middle East, and then returned to Europe concealed among large migrant flows. So again, open borders is evil. Remember this when you hear all of the stories about people being deported and ICE raids, and they're trying to evoke that empathy that makes you only focus on those purported victims and forget about the victims in places like France and elsewhere, even here in the United States. You're only focusing on the people that the media wants you to think is the victim, and you forget about the people on the other side of the moral equation. That is when your empathy has become toxic, and it gets you to support policies that are destructive, that are really bad for everyone, that are really bad for innocent people. So through toxic empathy, all of these European countries opened up their borders, and they allowed the infiltration of people like this who killed and raped and tortured innocent women, men, and children. Middle East expert Gilles Capel explains that intelligence services have become highly effective at monitoring online radicalization, but obviously this wasn't enough to stop this. The danger is particularly concerning because it involves younger individuals and is easily influenced by global events such as the conflict in Gaza and Israel. And then agitators exploit this to fuel anger and radicalization. In 2025, French authorities thwarted 6 planned Islamic extremist attacks involving suspects between the ages of 17 and 22. I think like at some point, like maybe we made a bad choice. And, you know, as Raymond Ibrahim explained, when people talk about, you know, the wars between Christians and Muslims, and they paint Christians as these agitators and these aggressors who victimized all of these innocent Muslims, that's not really what was going on. It was through agape love for their own innocent people, for their wives, for their children, that these Christian men laid down their lives to try to push back against the darkness of Islam. It was for not only their own sake, but the sake of innocent victims that they tried to push back against the scimitar with the sword. I mean, one of the first wars in the United States was against Islamists, the first Barbary War. And this is a way to love your neighbor. It is a way to love your neighbor, to push back against, through a peaceful and legal means, the Islamification of the United States. We can look at a place like France. We can look at an event like that to see why this is so incredibly necessary. Nehemiah 2:17 through 18. Then I said to them, you see the trouble we are in, how Jerusalem lies in ruins with its gates burned. Come, let us build the wall of Jerusalem that we may no longer suffer derision. And they said, let us rise up and build. So they strengthened their hands for the good work. The book of Nehemiah speaks to the importance of a barrier around a city or a barrier around a country. I'm not saying that the book of Nehemiah tells us that we have to do this, that we have to have walls, but God does not condemn strong borders. In fact, we see throughout scripture that strong borders are a symbol of control and protection and provision and wisdom. In fact, we read in Proverbs 25:28 that a man without self-control is like a city broken into and left without walls. And so the comparison there is that a man without self-control, he's going to bring himself and other people to ruin, just like a city that doesn't have any walls, that doesn't have any protections. It is the height of foolishness and irresponsibility, a total abdication of the responsibility to protect your neighbors and to protect your own citizens, to allow the basically unhindered migration of military-aged men from these war-torn countries, from these Muslim-majority countries. It is the opposite of loving your neighbor. It is hatred of your neighbor. It is a way to selfishly virtue signal to make yourself seem compassionate when really you're just outsourcing your compassion to the government and hoping that the bad products of those policies and the bad outcomes of those policies don't affect you. It is so incredibly selfish, and it might be well-intentioned, but you know what they say about the road to hell. It's paved with those. So I think one of the best things we can do is not only restrict illegal immigration, but legal immigration. Like, we should restrict the immigration from certain countries. I wouldn't be mad about an entire moratorium on immigration for the time being until we get our act together and until we figure out how to root out these terror cells. That's most important. And also to make sure that the collective power in Sharia is not subverting our rights and our safety as American citizens. And we got to get serious about that. That is something that people loved about Donald Trump when he first ran. Legal immigration is a really big problem, both in Europe and in the United States. And it's hard for people who are moral relativists to see that. But again, what have we said about 3 or 4 times? Not every worldview is the same. Some create chaos, some create good fruit. And we have to be very discerning about which one is which. And we got to love our neighbors and our families enough to be very, very clear and bold on that. Remember, you have walls, you have a fence, you have a lock on your door. It's not because you hate the people around you. It's not because you hate your neighbors. It's because you love the people inside. Nations are like families. It is our government's responsibility to lock our doors to protect us, to keep us safe. All right. We're going to switch gears in just a second, talk about something a little bit happier and more optimistic and exciting for Christians because, gosh, the dichotomy between light and darkness is so stark. But let me tell you about our next sponsor, and that is Preborn. Y'all, I love Preborn. I'm so grateful for what they do. I'm so grateful for how they serve moms and babies, and they're saving lives. They are supplying these pregnancy centers with the supplies they need to help women make the life-affirming choice. For example, sonogram equipment. We know when a woman sees and hears that baby inside the womb, she sees that this is a real human being, not just a clump of cells, like Planned Parenthood tells her, that she is so much more likely to choose life. And then these pregnancy centers are supplying these moms with what they need to parent, with what they need to maybe seek out adoptive parents. And so partner with Preborn, especially this holiday season. There's a lot of women who are in distress and they need someone to rally around them and help them know they're not alone. And your contribution, your donation helps make that happen. So go to preborn.com/Allie. Make whatever donation you can today. $28 covers the cost of an ultrasound, but whatever you can donate will help. Go to preborn.com/Allie. Okay, so in the midst of all of that kind of scariness, what did we say at the beginning? God's eternal plan of redemption is going off without a hitch. And I loved this Wall Street Journal headline. Christian music is everywhere, whether you realize it or not. And this article, this is actually from November 8th, highlighted the growing popularity of Christian music this year, thanks to artists like Forrest, Frank, and Brandon Lake, who have marketed their God-honoring music on social media. And we've talked about Forrest Frank quite a few times over the last few months. And I just want to say that Charlie Kirk and I were ahead on talking about this because we did a segment on Fox and Friends when Charlie was co-hosting Fox and Friends a few months ago. I believe it was in August, where we talked about this rise in Christian music. And I talked about Forrest Frank and how he is doing such a good job of creating like pop music that is really catchy, that a lot of people want to listen to, that regularly goes viral, but that is totally glorifying to the Lord. The article says as Christian artists embrace a wider variety of sounds and market songs savvily on social media, they're rapidly widening their reach. Faith-based music can go viral, just like rap or pop songs, and it gains an additional boost from its close relationship with country, which currently dominates the charts. Okay, that's so true. I was just thinking about this, that country music is also having a moment right now. And this is good. Like, if I want genres of music to have a moment, it's definitely Christian and country music and not rap music. You can say what you want about that, but it's better. I'm not saying all country music is glorifying to God because that's not true, but it's not as degenerate as rap music. Can we just be honest about that? It's just true. Brandon Lake has amassed 2.5 billion streams across the platforms he sang at Charlie's memorial. It was amazing. Dusty Bibles singer Josiah Queen, that's one of his songs. I love that song. He's only 22. He has racked up 515 million career streams. Of course, Forrest Frank, millions and millions as well. In the first half of 2025, Christian releases outpaced new tracks from every genre except country and streaming growth. That is incredible. Even though Christian music still holds a small slice of the total U.S. listening pie, its portion has grown from 1.7% at the close of 2023 to a solid 2% by mid-2025. That might seem smaller. That might seem small, but it's actually not. This is edging close to dance and electronic 3.3% share. When artists who most people see as secular come and do these Christian songs, they reach such a larger audience. I've seen so many videos on TikTok where it's like, I'm not religious, but low-key Christian music slaps now, which is true. So I'm excited about that. And obviously, I think a lot of people have a healthy skepticism when anything that was not mainstream becomes mainstream. You worry about an artist selling out or compromising. I certainly haven't seen that from someone like Forrest Frank. So I think we need to pray for them because we know Satan hates this. Satan hates the gospel going out. Satan hates the name of Christ being glorified in a mainstream way. And he wants these singers to compromise. He wants these singers to love money and fame more than they love glorifying God. And that's not something that's exclusive or special to these people. That is true of every single one of us. Like, he will give us, like, Satan is content to give us our pride in our theology or our belief that God's favor is tied to money or success as long as we are not giving the Lord our full heart. So pray for those that have platforms, whether it's a podcast or whether it's a singer. Pray for protection over them, that God would keep their hearts humble and keep their minds focused on them. But we should be a part of this. Like, even if you listen to any of these artists and you're like, that's not my cup of tea, we should be excited about this. And we should be spreading the word, because like, we want more people listening to edifying music. It's good for their heart. It's good for their mind. It's good for their lives. And God's word doesn't return void. When they hear God's word, when it seeps into their heart, God uses that as a seed planted that he will give growth to at some point, how he sees fit. And all of us just play a part in that. And so these people are giving the Lord the praise they deserve, and people are listening to that, and that is really exciting. Now, speaking of music, I wanted to talk about this song from Kelsea Ballerini, who is a country music artist, but like a lot of country music, it's like hard to tell between country and pop these days. And she's got this song that is very relevant and relatable to a lot of people right now. And I've listened to it a few times. It's really good. It doesn't relate to me, but I can see how this vulnerability is speaking to what a lot of people feel. This is certainly not Christian, but it's kind of reflecting this trend that we're seeing among a lot of young people, especially young men actually, and wanting to go back to tradition, wanting to go back to church, wanting to go back to marriage, wanting to actually have children. This is a positive trend that we're seeing among young men, a negative trend among young women. We are seeing a lot of young women say they don't want to get married. In fact, there was this Pew Research study that I just saw circulating. I think this is full screen 31. It says girls are now less likely than boys to say they want to get married. This is the percent of 12th graders saying they're most likely to choose to get married in the long run. Only 61% of girls say that. 74% of boys say that. That's actually not that different from 1993. So this is from 1993 to 2023. In 1993, 83% of girls said, yeah, I'm probably going to get married one day. 76% of boys said that. 2023, 30 years later, 61%. That's a 22% drop among girls, whereas it's only a 2% drop among boys. And this kind of correlates with the trend that we've seen of young men, boys going back to church, and girls just becoming increasingly progressive, increasingly secular. Anyway, back to Kelsea Ballerini. She wrote this song called I Sit in Parks. And she's a woman in her 30s, and she's reflecting, hang on, I'm sitting in parks and I'm watching these adults, this couple, this married couple, the same age as me with kids, and they seem happy. Did I miss it? Here's thought 7.
Thinking, did I miss it? By now, is it a lucid dream? Is it my fault for chasing things a body clock doesn't wait for? I did the damn tour. It's what I wanted, what I got. I spun around and then I stopped and wondered if I missed the mark.
So she's talking about how she's watching this couple and their kids, and she does the tour. She became successful. It's what she wanted, but did she make the right choice? This is a really sad verse, and good for her for being this vulnerable, but it's bleak. It just is. So I sit in parks, sunglasses dark, and I hit the vape, hallucinate a nursery with Noah's Ark. They lay on a blanket, and I can't say that word. He loves her. I wonder if she wants my freedom like I want to be a mother. But Rolling Stone says I'm on the right road. So I refill my Lexapro. And Lexapro is, of course, a medication for depression. And then the last line, she says, so I sit in parks, checking benchmarks. Taryn's due in June. The album's due in March. And Taryn is probably a friend. And I just wonder, we see all these statistics of these women saying, I don't need no man. I don't want to get married. I don't know if I want to have kids. I'm going to just, I'm just going to look to the government to take care of me and to take care of other people. That's how I'm going to channel my motherhood instincts. We've talked a lot about this misplaced mothering, how this motherhood instinct that we all have when we're little girls, it doesn't go away. We take care of our pets, we take care of our dolls, we take care of our flowers because that is the instinct that God has given us in general as women. And that's supposed to be channeled towards children. whether or not you get married. If you don't get married, then that is channeled towards children in some kind of ministry or volunteer capacity or teaching capacity. And if you do get married and you do have children, it's supposed to be channeled towards children. But that motherhood instinct is supposed to be channeled towards people, not your profession, not your pet, not your plant, and not politics. I read a line last night. I'm reading A Tree Grows in Brooklyn. This is one of these books that I've been reading off and on for months now. And I wish I had the line in front of me. It was such a good line that described the teachers in the early 1900s. This is a fictional book. But it was talking, it basically, I'm going to butcher it, but it was basically like they had been starved of their motherhood instincts, so they had become neurotic in trying to find a different channel for those instincts. And I'm not saying this is true of all women who aren't mothers. I'm not saying that. I'm just talking in principle and in general and statistically. I do think that the starvation of those natural motherhood instincts does lead to a neuroticism and a sadness that we actually see manifest through progressive values and democratic politics and toxic empathy. We've got more on this in just a second. Let me tell you about our last sponsor for the day. The American Revolution did not begin in 1776. It began in the hearts and minds of people who were in America generations earlier. Those were ordinary men and women who crossed the ocean not for comfort, but for the chance to live according to faith and reason, free from tyranny. And that story is not just history, it is still true today. Hillsdale College's new Colonial America miniseries takes you back to that beginning, exploring how faith, liberty, and virtue built the groundwork for a nation unlike any other. In 6 beautifully produced lessons, Hillsdale professors walk through the political, religious, and cultural ideas that made revolution possible and show why those same ideas are still worth defending today. Hillsdale has more than 40 online courses from the Constitution to C.S. Lewis to the stories of Genesis that are totally free to you. That is amazing. You will be smarter. You will be wiser when you sign up for Hillsdale's courses. Go to hillsdale.edu/relatable to enroll. No cost, easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/relatable. Okay, so if we look at some of the priorities that young women do have, we're looking at NBC News, for example. If we see male voted for Trump, number one of the top priorities that they have is having children, the number one priority they have. Female voted for Trump, achieving financial independence. So already, like, we see such a difference there. A male voted for Harris, having a job or a career you find fulfilling. Female voted for Harris, having a job or career you find fulfilling. But the men that voted for Trump, they are prioritizing having children, being married. Yes, they want to achieve financial independence. I think it's very telling that one of the highest priorities for the females that voted for Trump, for everyone else, this is like low, but having emotional stability. That's what they want. And that means that they don't really have it because they're refilling their vape and their Lexapro. And I think they're sad about how their life is. And again, I'm not denigrating all groups of people. This is just statistically like what is going on. And there is a huge gender gap. But it's not just a gender gap and it's not just a political gap. It really is a marriage gap. Like when you break it down even further, the priorities of women who are married versus unmarried are very, very different. The politics of women who are married versus unmarried are very, very different. I know that we as women, we don't like to talk about this, but the truth is that women are very influenced by our husbands. That's a good thing. That's a good thing, by the way. Like, God made us that way. I don't care. Like, you can talk to whatever girl boss feminist that you want. Women want to be led. Like, we want to be led by someone who is strong, by someone who is decisive, by someone who is smart. It's not about wanting to be micromanaged or being incapable or being, like intellectually weak. It's not about that. But women want to be led by a strong man, by a husband. And that is why some of the strongest women I know, their politics and their ideas have changed after getting married because they love and respect their husband. And their husband, might have been like, babe, vote for Joe Biden. Like, did you think about this? And it might take that for them to be like, oh yeah. Again, not speaking about all single women. I know single women who are very conservative, strong Christians, all of that. But I also know a lot of women who would probably be liberal if they didn't get married. And I just wonder if progressives know that, and that's why they try to subvert marriage so much. But marriage is such a stabilizing force. It's a stabilizing force for men and men's nature. It's a stabilizing force for women and women's nature. Men who want to seek conquest, that has to be channeled in the right and moral way. And women who are typically driven very often by our emotions, that has to be harnessed for good. Children who need that physical and emotional protection and nurturing, all of that is found in the family, the marriage between a man and a woman who bring two very good things to the table that is necessary not only in the lives of children, but in the life of a community and of a country. And when we miss that, we're missing a lot. And you just see a lot of misguided women, and I'm sure a lot of disappointed men because of that. So those of us who have little kids, let's raise up our children in the way they should go, to make sure that they desire not only to follow the Lord, although that's first and foremost, but also healthy marriages and to have children and to raise children in the Lord, that we're raising girls who value that we're raising men who know how to cherish and seek a godly woman. And I would feel really good if I knew, which I do know, that there are many parents who are doing that for their children. But if all of us can just commit together, those of us who have these, are they Gen Alpha? I don't even know what generation our kids are. If we are committing to raising them in that way and protecting them from the predation of technology and progressive politics and entertainment and all of that, then that would be a good thing. All right. That's all we have time for today. Remember, the Lord is in all of this, and he is using us to infuse light in every single sphere that we occupy. All right, we'll be back here on Wednesday.